What is technically holding back enterprises from being able to fully adopt agents in the enterprise? I'm Jeff Hollan. I'm Director of Product at Snowflake, and I want to spend the next 20 minutes sharing with all of you some of what I have learned in over 100 different conversations with enterprise leaders over the last few months, and understanding the potential for AI agents, but also what are some of the challenges that we need to overcome, and a few best practices that we picked up along the way that I wanted to share out with the broader community. So one of the first things that is very clear to me is that agents have a huge potential to truthfully transform how work is done in every single enterprise. And there's a few dimensions to this that have sprung up to me and become quite apparent. The first one is just imagine the amount of work and the productivity benefits that come when you have an AI agent helping you. Now, if any of you develop software code, you likely are already experiencing some of this right now because one of the first ways we're seeing agents roll out in an enterprise is to assist with software development. So think about all those tasks that are generally time consuming, maybe a bit mundane. This is across every facet though, not just software development, marketing, financial planning, sales. If you have an AI agent that's augmenting your work, you're able to become so much more productive, and the output that you're able to give to your customers or to the enterprise is significantly increased. Now, this just gets amplified when you think of the potential for autonomous agents. So it's not just helping me when I'm doing my work take care of some of the tasks that might be more time consuming and mundane. It's imagine having something that is running 24/7, analyzing the enterprise, seeing what's happening, and then making either intelligent recommendations or intelligence decisions to continue to help the enterprise operate efficiently. Now, the last big opportunity here might not be as obvious to folks, but if you've looked at any enterprise, there are dozens and dozens of different systems and applications that have to work together. This is a huge burden on every enterprise because they have to understand, how do I get system A to talk to system B? So you'll see these one-off, point-by-point solutions that take time to develop and time to maintain as each of these applications are evolving. Well, I'm excited for a world where AI agents are able to autonomously bridge these different systems, being able to interact with those systems and use intelligence and reasoning to create dynamic bridges. Now, all of these things alone can significantly impact an enterprise. AI agents can really start to chip off all three of these things together. But if you step back and you think, okay, well, what's required? Like, what technically would need to be true in order for an agent to be able to make these types of decisions or provide this type of assistance? So an example that I'll share a little bit as we go throughout this is one of the customers I've had the chance to work a lot with is Whoop. Now, if you've not heard of Whoop before, they build fitness wearables. These are wearables that you wear 24/7. They collect a tremendous amount of data. And then that data is made available to the consumer to understand health habits, but is also available to Whoop so that they can make better products, improve their products, as well as a bunch of additional data for them. So as I've been working with Whoop and I've spent some time with their product teams, with some of the other teams in their organization, one thing that has become abundantly clear is in their tasks, it's imperative to have the right context and the right data so that the agent can perform the task that it needs. So very often, when you think about agents in context, we focus very, very heavily on retrieval augmented generation or RAG style context. How this often works is you take a tremendous amount of documents. Maybe these are Google Drive documents, Slack conversations, SharePoint PDFs, you name it. I often talk about these as unstructured data. These are just big blobs of text or images. And what RAG will do is that when I ask a question or if my agent needs to perform a task, it will go search through all of the content and return the relevant context for that task. And this is incredibly powerful. This is one of the essential building blocks that enterprises need for an agent to work, but it is not enough. Because what about all of the, what I call structured data that powers an enterprise? Think of enterprise databases and the type of data that is stored in an enterprise database. There's revenue data, there's sales data, there's employee data. There's data about every facet of an organization that is landing in some database or some spreadsheet or some structured format within an enterprise. Now, enterprises often have hundreds, if not thousands, of different tables. Each of those have so many different columns, and each of them are filled with values. But if I want to understand a question like, what was revenue like in the last week? I can't just go search all my documents and use RAG to know what revenue was. No, I need to access those databases. I need to access those systems of record and query that data in order to get the right context back for an agent. So one of the things that I have found is that in order for enterprises to reach full potential of these agents, you have to bring together the structured data with the unstructured data. Now, in this journey, while that might seem easy enough, surely you can go to ChatGPT and you can say, give me a query to give me back the right result. In reality, it's much harder than that out of the box. And that's because of a number of different challenges, especially present within enterprises, to make sure that you're surfacing the right data in the right context to that agent or to that enterprise user to surface that structured data as well. So I want to spend a few minutes now and walk you through 4 of the largest problems that we have come across when working with enterprise structured data and some of the solutions that we've employed to help bridge this gap and, again, help these agents be able to accomplish more. So one of the things that we've employed in this journey is actually an agentic path. So that if an agent or a human needs some context that's in structured data, we don't just send that straight to an underlying model and say, give me the data. We actually flow it through this entire workflow of various different steps. And you'll see as I go through those 4 problems, each of these different steps will make a little bit more sense. So let's start with the first big problem. Very often, when an agent or a human needs to perform a task, especially when working in an enterprise, we don't include all of the necessary context to give the right answer. Super common example. I want to understand what is something that is happening in the US. Maybe I say something like this. Maybe it's a conversational agent. I just say US. Well, do I mean United States? And if I mean the United States, is my data, if I go look at the database, is that what the column has US called? Is it called US? Is it called USA? Is it called United States of America? The truth is, I might have it be called any number of those things. But if I went immediately and I queried that database and I said, give me all of the sales where the column equals US, just as I put in the question, it's very possible I'll return no results. Because maybe in my database, it's all called United States of America. So there are no records where the value is US. Similarly, there's often very unique business terminology or business functions. If you go to a finance department, you can talk to them about ARR, that's annualized run rate, an incredibly common acronym. But do I have annualized run rate as a representation in my database? I probably do not. It's probably called something else, like revenue over time. So one of the solutions that we found a significant amount of success with is by enabling users in enterprises to provide a semantic model in addition to the data model. So think about the data model as the actual table, the columns, the rows, how the data is represented. The semantic model is the bridge between the things that a business user might be used to or talking about and the strings that exist in the database. So the semantic model acts as this really critical bridge between the two. So in my semantic model, I can help provide clarifications for things like, hey, when we say ARR, we mean this. Or we have an internal product or an internal terminology, and these are some of the synonyms that might exist. Another really important piece of context that we surface through the semantic model is relationships between things. What's the relationship between a marketing event and a sales activity? And how in my data model might that relationship be surfaced? These things would be obvious if you ask an employee at the organization, but they're not going to be obvious to an agent. So it needs to be captured. It needs to be codified somewhere. So we provide the semantic model as well as some additional fine-tuning benefits so that we can take care of common universal ones. For example, the US, we actually know how to navigate US to United States of America because it's a pretty common synonym across many organizations. But again, the important thing to note here is there often needs to be additional context somewhere for the agent to know. The semantic model is a really good spot for this. And you'll see across the industry, semantic models are becoming increasingly top of mind for many industries. So consider how your agents could or should interact with the semantic model later. Now, another thing that we've learned through experience and some mistakes is that oftentimes questions can be ambiguous. I might ask a question like, what is our best product? Well, what do I mean when I say best? Do I mean the product that has sold the most units? Do I mean the product that's generated the most profit? Do I mean the product that has had the least amount of defects or issues? The reality is, I could mean any of those things. Those are all very valid things. But if I go ask my agent, go find the best product, how does it know which one I might mean? How does it navigate the ambiguity? So if you remember back to that workflow I showed at the beginning, actually the very first step that we do is the step where we check for ambiguity. Before we worry about looking at any semantic model or data model or querying any real data, let's just understand, is there ambiguity that exists in this question? And if there is ambiguity, like something like the word best, we'll go look at that semantic model and we'll go back and we'll ask for clarification. We'll say things like, hey, you wanted me to find the best product? I can see that I have access to a few characteristics of your product, maybe the amount of sales, maybe the amount of support issues. Help me understand and clarify the ambiguity before I go make a potential mistake. So this has become a really important step in, again, increasing the quality and the accuracy of these different models. Now, the third problem that we've come across, and again, this is a symptom of the complexity of any enterprise, is the shape and the size and the reality of the data model can sometimes overwhelm an LLM. And this can reduce the amount of quality that it uses when trying to generate a query like what I'm showing here. Now, let me walk you through what I mean by this. So again, think of an enterprise. Enterprises have thousands of different tables. Those tables have so many different columns, and they're not optimized to be human readable. Often, how enterprises have been building databases for the last 20, 30, 40 years is to be machine readable. No human is supposed to go query the database. Applications are supposed to query the database. So what happens if I now go send an agent to a database, and that agent is tasked to go figure out revenue related to sales? And now it is dealing with column names like V underscore RV underscore 2 and C underscore F name for first name. Well, if you throw all these kind of technical jargon terms at an LLM and then say, go create a SQL query, the quality is significantly less than if it's working with more understandable and reasonable, I would say, human readable terms. Now, I don't want to go ask all these enterprises, go change your data model and make it all human readable. That's a Herculean task. But it's much easier in this agentic workflow for us to ask the agent, hey, before you even worry about generating the query, go generate a human readable or a reasonable representation of the parts of the data model that you mean. So what I mean is, while the physical layer might have customer's first name as C underscore FN, this generated logical layer could just be first name or last name or address or whatever is much more reasonable. Include some of the relationships between different values, but we found that if you ask an agent now to generate some SQL based on these characteristics, it gives much higher quality results in retrieving the context than having to deal with the messy state that enterprise data is often in. Now, the last problem that I want to spend some time and talk to you about is that we found there were issues if you ask the agent to do too much in one single step. Now, one example of this is that if you've spent any time in the data world or querying data, you know that there's a few patterns when you write a data query. There's time series analytics, there's comparative analytics, there's ranking analytics. And depending on the type of analytics that you're doing, you're going to follow different formats of your queries. And if you just send an agent a question like, show me sales over the last 3 months, well, that's time series. I know that. But if you tell it to both generate the query and understand that it's time series, the quality will go down. So what we instead have added to our agentic workflow is break these up into 2 separate decisions. First, identify and classify the type of pattern needed here. Is this a time series query? Great. If so, flag it as so. Then send that to the model that actually generates the query so that you can say, generate a time series query that answers this question. And if you just separate those 2 decision points, you get much higher quality in what you're able to answer. So a very simple thing, but again, all these things make a difference. So if I think about all of these steps coming together, again, it's much harder than just saying, hey, agent model, go retrieve this structured data context. There's a lot of steps that happen along the way. So this is the end-to-end workflow that we have that helps us get to the eventual spot where, again, we want to surface either to the human or to the agent the right context. Now, this helps bring together all of this super value structured data into this world of unstructured data to help agents complete all sorts of tasks within an enterprise. Now, there's still many problems left to solve. There's still a lot we have yet to do, but I wanted to show an early prototype of what we've been building with the team at Whoop. So this here is a chat interface with Whoop that they can use to understand more about their data and more about their organization. So here I'm going to ask a question like, hey, we just launched a new product. Help me understand how the product launch is going. Now, what this agent is able to do is all of those things that I just mentioned, but you'll see that it was able to do it very, very quickly. So it generated the query in a few seconds so that I can start to access things like sales data and manufacturing data and forecast data. The agent can then reason around that. It can combine it with unstructured data. Maybe there's a Slack conversation that has some information about how our launch is going. And now for a human working at Whoop, now they understand within a few seconds, this is how my launch is going. And even better yet, if I kept this demo going, I would say, what can we do to increase sales? What can the agent tell me, again, through that structured and unstructured data to help me actually increase profitability? So the potential here is really, really exciting. And what I foresee is going to happen is agents start to roll out within an enterprise. They're going to target a few specific workloads and technologies. The first one is that BI, or business intelligence as we know it, is not going to look the same a year or two from now. It does not make sense for most of an employee's interface with their systems of truth in an organization to only be through dashboards, pre-created dashboards that they have to manually navigate through. No, I would much rather have these agentic intelligence systems surface for me the right context for the right application. These could be either conversational apps that you're building, like what I just showed. These could be agentic apps where this is all happening machine to machine. Either way, I don't want a dashboard as my main interface. I want to be able to access the data directly. So you're going to see agentic workflows really start to disrupt where you see so many people digging through dashboards today. Another trend that I'm confident we're going to start to see is that the technologies that are able to have the best understanding of a business organization, all of those semantics that I referenced before, those are going to be the ones that take the biggest improvements and you see the most adoption with in an enterprise. It's going to be not just about having the technology and the cool demos. It's can the agent navigate how this department relates to that department? What data, unstructured and structured, does this department have? What are the different classifications of data and the data controls? All of these things are critical for anyone who works in these enterprises, and they're going to be just as critical for any agent to be able to augment those tasks. So again, this role of the semantic layer or this business relationship, this business ontology is just going to be growing with the explosion of AI agents. And the last thing that I'm very excited to see is that previously, enterprises used to focus very heavily on what were called systems of record. You might be very familiar with this term. This is, for any enterprise, where am I keeping my source of truth, my system of record for critical operations like sales and employees and you name it. You go ask any enterprise data leader and they'll be able to tell you, here's our systems of record. Well, just as important is going to be this fluid layer on top of the systems of record, which are going to be systems of intelligence. And this is going to be how different applications, how different processes are able to leverage, add to, or retrieve data from those various systems of record. This is going to be an incredibly important layer in every single enterprise, and that's really going to fuel a lot of these agentic innovations. So hopefully this makes sense. We'll see together how well some of those predictions fall in. But thank you so much for watching. If you want to reach out to me, maybe you have questions on what I shared, maybe you want to learn a little bit more, or maybe you have some comments or suggestions, I would love to talk with everyone here. You can find me on Twitter or X at Jeff Hollan or at LinkedIn. Thank you so much for spending some time today to watch, and I hope this was helpful. So have a great rest of your day.